It seems to me that I have always known this, and that I came into this world knowing that you become what you think about, whether you want it or not. I was really very blessed. I lived in an orphanage until I was 10, in a series of foster homes with my older brother, but he was sick quite a bit. He was very anemic, and I used to have to help him as a young boy. He was 16 months older than I was, and this was when I was 4, 5, 6, and 7, and so on. And I can remember I lived out in Mount Clemens, Michigan, at 231 Town Hall Road with a lady. Her name was Mrs. Scarf, and she had a lot of children would come and go from there. And I was in a foster home because the circumstances at that time were such that my father had walked out on his family, and I was born in the Depression, and there was no welfare and things like that in those days. So it was like people just helped each other out. And my mother was working as a candy girl in Detroit, on the east side of Detroit, earning $17 a week, and she just didn't have the money and wasn't able to provide for her children. So we lived out at this one particular place, and I can remember whenever a new child would come to the house, they would always say, "Go find Wayne." And I would be out in the back. They had orchards there, and this was no hardship. This was no difficult thing for me. This was a great blessing, I think, in my life. Those earliest days. And I can remember a girl named Martha came, and they were dropping her off for basically the same reasons that we were dropped off there. And they said, "Go find Wayne." And I came and I started talking to Martha, and she was crying, and she was all upset, and she was sad, and I was trying to convince her that she didn't have to be sad, that this was, and I remember saying to her, "This is a great place, there's no parents here. You can do pretty much anything that you want. I mean, you've got a lot of freedom, and we're going to have a great time." And I can remember being in school, at the public school. It was a numbered school. They didn't even name them in that day. It was PS number 127, and I remember the teachers, one time we were out on the playground and all the kids were all upset, and I said, "What's wrong?" And they said, "Well, the teacher said this is the worst class that she ever had," and she was so all upset, and she was angry, and she was hurt, and I said, "Well, why would you allow her opinions to have anything to, if this is her hardest day, then her life is just easy, and I can remember talking to other people about, all you have to do is change the way you think. And it goes from being a miserable experience or a tough experience or a hard experience to one that you can do anything that you want with. And when my mother got our family all back together again when I was nine, almost 10 years old. And I can remember her telling me what it was like when I was just a baby, when I was just like an infant, that I was the one child that could make everybody else laugh. At times when everybody else would. She said we were waiting for a bus one time when we were just real babies before I went into the orphanage, and she said a car came by, and it was in Detroit, and there was all this slush, and we all went flying down. Everybody had dirt on them and dirty snow, and we were laying in the ground, and everybody was crying. And she said you were and upset and mad because our clothes were wet and so on. And she said you just stood up and said, "This is great, isn't this wonderful? Look, we don't have to do this, and we don't, just turning it into something positive." It's like, so the ability to be able to do that was something, I can't remember a time in my life when I didn't know that if I really went to work on how I thought, that things just didn't have to be bad. I was the richest kid in the orphanage. I've talked about that many times in my lectures, that a snowstorm was a time we had 2 snow shovels at the home, and one of them had the edges all curled up from hitting the curbs, and you couldn't make any money with that one. So the other one, when it would snow, I would go downstairs and I would take the good snow shovel and I would put it under my bed, and I'd sleep with it right with me in the bed so that nobody else would get it. And I would get up before everybody else got up, and I would go out and I would just shovel everybody else's snow, shovel the walk. And then later on, and I just go knock on the door and just tell them that I shoveled their walk. And they'd say, some would say thank you, and some would give me a dime, which doesn't sound like much, but that's about $3,000 in today's money. And when I found out that soda pop bottles, for example, were worth 2 cents each, that if you took them back, you could get 2 cents back, that was just like one of the great awarenesses and awakenings of my life, because I would follow people around who were drinking a Coca-Cola and say, you almost done with that? They said, well, no, I'm not. Well, just whenever you're ready. I just followed them and then and I had we had a coal bin where we lived because it was coal furnaces, and we filled that coal bin with soda pop bottles, and I would take it back. It was just always easy to change, and all the other kids would be not having any money and complaining about not being able to have abundance or be able to have some level of being able to buy themselves like just a little donut or a Pepsi Cola or something. They couldn't figure it out, and it always seemed so easy to me that all you had to do was just look around and see the opportunities in anything, and it had nothing to do with whether there are opportunities there. There always are opportunities. I'm 67 years old. I have never, ever been unemployed or even can't even deal with the concept of unemployment. It isn't that I've had no job. I've always had more jobs than and it isn't because I've been through all good economic times. There've been some pretty sour economic times over the last 50 years or so. I just have never known how to think any other way than if you change the way you think about things, you can create whatever it is you want for yourself in your life. It's just a simple knowing. I mean, I've made a living talking about it. I've written lots of books about it and so on. But I have always lived it and practiced it, and I still do today. It was Thomas Troward. I don't know. He did some lectures on mental science way back in the 1907, 1908. He was from Scotland. And one of the things that he said is that the law of flotation was not discovered by the contemplation of the sinking of things. So that, like before the 15th and 16th centuries, all of the ships were made out of wood. Not because iron wasn't available and steel wasn't available, but because there was a belief that wood floated. So therefore you had to make ships out of things that floated. That's literally how and then someone came along and said that it has absolutely nothing to do with what things are made out of. It has to do with the amount of water that is being dispersed. That's what determines whether something will float or not. And I think about that all the time, because it's in the contemplation of what you desire that you create what it is that you want to have for yourself. It's in your willingness to contemplate it, and nothing more, according to Troward and mental science. So that I think about the Wright brothers, 100 or so years ago. It's like, and I said the law of flying was not discovered by the contemplation of the staying on the ground of things. So that these were two people, like for me, to figure out how to get an airplane to fly, and my limited knowledge of all of that, I would probably have contemplated the staying on the ground of things. Like this is what happened. But there's somebody came along and contemplated the idea that if you get enough speed going and you have the right design and you get pressure underneath something like this, and you get that this thing is going to lift off the earth. Somebody had to contemplate that idea. And everybody who contemplated that it wasn't possible, that it couldn't work, was a part of why flying didn't take place, because there was no new law discovered in the early part of the 20th century, any more than electricity was discovered by Thomas Edison or anyone like that. I mean, the ability to have electricity has always been there. Somebody has to contemplate. So it's like in your own personal life, your willingness to contemplate yourself as a person who is capable of attracting into your life what you want, having the kind of relationships that you want, being able to have abundance where scarcity always exists. All you have to do is begin the process by being willing to contemplate the presence of that in your life. And I've always been a person that I can remember throughout my life as someone who could contemplate myself being able to do things that most people couldn't. And I can give you a good example. When my mother got us all back together, and we were living in Detroit, on the east side of Detroit, and we got a new television set. It was a black and white. It was a screen about this big. It was an Admiral, and we had it in our home, and it was like, oh my God, black and white television. You remember Uncle Milty and all and so on. And there was a guy that was on TV. His name was Steve Allen, and he was on The Tonight Show. And I was 11, 12, 13 years old. I was born in 1940, so I was 51 or 52. And I used to stay up every night and watch The Tonight Show. Even though I had to go to school the next day, there was just something about that show, and you know, all of the characters and smock and all the things that Steve Allen would do on it. And I would come down when I would be talking the next day, and I would be telling my mother and my two brothers that when I do the Tonight Show, this is what I would say. I wouldn't have said what Louis and I say, the way reacted, how he reacted to that. I would have said this, and I used to do this. And my brothers and my mother would say, "That's just Wayne. He's just nutty. He thinks he's on the Tonight Show. He thinks he's going to do the Tonight Show." And I would go up into my room at, on this little tiny house that we lived in, a little 2-bedroom house that 5 of us lived in because my mother remarried, and I would see myself doing the Tonight Show. I would just practice it, and Steve Allen became someone that I was really enamored of. Well, fast forward, 30 years or whatever, and I've written a book, Your Erroneous Zones, and the Tonight Show calls, and they ask me if I would like to come on and do it. So I do my first stint on the Tonight Show. I did the show like 37 times over a period of 3 or 4 years with all these different hosts, but Johnny Carson was on, and the first guest on the very first show when I did the show was Steve Allen. And it was like something clicked in me that I had contemplated that as a child. I had always had a knowing, and I can remember sitting there talking to Johnny about this thing that, and Steve Allen was sitting there right next to me, and we were talking about that kind of thing. So that by putting my attention on something, it wasn't some deliberate thing that I was doing, when I was 11 or 12 years old that was designating that I was going to be a person who was going to be appearing on talk shows 30 years from now. It was just an awareness a willingness to contemplate myself in that kind of a place. And I think the power of contemplation is the thing that most people haven't harnessed yet. And when you harness it in your life, there's absolutely no limit to what you can attract into your life. If you absolutely stay focused on what it is that you're going to manifest and attract, you're not going to do it in your time. Jackson Browne sings a song that says, "And creation reveals its secrets by and by." I mean, you can't push the river. It's all done in divine time, but it will show. It will show. It will manifest. It will attract itself. And I'm never surprised any longer about anything that I put my thoughts on that I can attract it into my life. I just absolutely know that law of attraction and that it absolutely works. And I have absolutely no doubt about it. And I feel as if before I even came into this world, when I was in the world of spirit, that I had a conversation with God. And it was God saying to me, what would you like to do in this lifetime? And I said, well, I'd really like to spend a lifetime teaching self-reliance. Because that's truly all I've ever done since the time I was just a little boy, through all my life. I mean, I could just go through all of the things that I've done. It's been always about teaching self-reliance. And God said, you're sure you want to spend a whole lifetime teaching self-reliance? I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. And he said, well, we better get your little ass into an orphanage then.
A Persian poet from back in the ancient times in the 13th century, his name was Jalaluddin Rumi. And Rumi has this observation that's been very important and very powerful to me. He said, "The morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep." Let me say it again. The morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. I'd like to take a poll. Just by a show of hands, I'd like to ask how many people in this room, and there's about 3,000 of us here tonight, I'd like to ask you, how many of you awaken at one time or another between the hours of 3 and 4 a.m.? Let me just see by a show of hands. And if you look around, you see that this is a universal experience. Now, what do you think that is? If everybody, almost everybody, awakens at some time between 3 and 4. Now, for some of us, we just interpret that as, all right, this is my age. I'll just run into the bathroom and I'll be right back. And you may make that visit several times a night. I don't know. But there's more to that. And I'd like you to now, of all of those people who raised their hand at this idea that you awaken sometime between 3 and 4 a.m., how many of you How many of you awaken at exactly the same time? Exactly the same time, with a little digital clock next to you. What is your time? 3:18. What is your time? 2:20. What is yours? 4:50. So like there's a, and this happens repeatedly over and over again. My time is 3:13. I awaken at 3:13 night after night after night. I look over, I've got this little clock. It's not an alarm clock, it's just a little digital clock. I just look over and it's 3:13 again and again and again. So what I had trained myself to do in the writing of this book, in the inspiration book, is to put my feet on the floor and say to myself, all right, you are going to awaken, because here's what Rumi said: the morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. Do you realize that between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the night, this is the time when you're closest to your source? This is the time when it's the quietest. It is the time when it's the most peaceful, when there are the least distractions. And of course, in Miracles it says the memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. A mind at war with itself remembers not eternal gentleness. Eternal gentleness. That's what you came from. It beckons you back to be awake. It's the most creative time in your life. Try it. Take that moment that you are being called by your source and awaken, and force yourself to shake the cobwebs out. And if you can't, then put your feet on the floor and say, look, if I have to go back to sleep, I'm going to sleep with my feet on the floor. And after a while, that gets very uncomfortable, and you'll get yourself up. Now, when I do that and I get up, and I live on Maui, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank all of you for my beautiful home that I have on Maui. And when I get up at that is the most glorious time to be out there. And I go out onto the lanai, and I get this sense of this powerful feeling of inspiration. It just is overwhelming to me. And I walk by my writing table, and it pulls me. It's pulling me towards it. It's almost beckoning me and saying, please, please come to me. I want you to, and I sit there sometimes, and I literally wonder, where is this coming from? The words are they just flow, and I sit there and I write by hand. And as I'm writing and allowing this to flow through my heart and onto the pages, I just think to myself, I wonder what's going to come next. I wonder when it's going to come next. It's almost as if God is saying, this is why you're here. And I can't get you any other time because it's just so busy, and there's horns bonk, and there's so many distractions. But here's a time when you can just be with me. Just be in spirit. Just be inspired, inspirado. Be in this space with me. And I will then allow what creative juices that you have forgotten about because you edged me out for so much a part of your life. And here it is. And you'll find yourself getting the right ideas, examining things that you never thought of before. Writing, some of you, I know you do it in your sleep many times, you'll write a poem and it'll be so phenomenal, and then you'll say, well, I'll remember that tomorrow. And then you get up and you can't get any of it. The morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. Use those hours. And forget about the idea that, let's see now, I went to bed at 11, and if I get up at 3, that means 4 hours, so I'm going to be 4 hours deficient all day long. I'm not going to be... Forget that. You've got an eternity to sleep. An eternity to sleep. And when you learn to meditate and get quiet and get peaceful, you can always, in 20 minutes time of meditation, any time during the day, get the equivalent of a full night's sleep. Don't go back to sleep. I'd like to speak in this program about what I call the rewards for inspiration. Things that will be your payoffs, your prizes, if you decide to move into spirit, into this world of spirit that I'm speaking about here on PBS. Back in the 300 or so years ago. We're not quite sure exactly when. There was a great teacher in India. His name was Patanjali. And in all the research that I've done on Patanjali, there's not sure if it was one person or a series of people or whatever it is, but it's great teachings, and I've immersed myself in the discourses of Patanjali and the sutras and practiced it. And one of the things that Patanjali, who was teaching people about being miracle workers at that time, teaching them about things that no one had ever heard about before, about the power of the repetition of the sound of the name of God as a way of manifesting something into your life, teaching people about being invisible, stuff that's a little bit strange, but that's, you know, it's like being 65 has its advantages, you know, because I can talk about things that are weird. And I usually point it out so you don't think I don't know that this might sound a little strange. But I would like to suggest to you that he offered something about inspiration that I want to offer to you. And there are 6 of these things, and I want to cover each one of them in this program. He said, when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all of your thoughts break their bonds. Your mind transcends limitations. 3, your consciousness expands in every direction. And 4, you find yourself in a new and a great and a wonderful world. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents come alive. And 6, you discover yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever dreamed yourself to be. Those are the rewards. It's not like you're going to win the lottery. It's not, and you may. It's not that somebody's going to come riding into your life on a white horse or whatever. These are the rewards. These are the things that are going to be so powerful for you. The first of these is what? When you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, 1, all of your thoughts break their bonds. All of your thoughts break their bonds. What do we mean by your bonds? Your bonds are the thoughts that you have that keep you disconnected from your source. They are thoughts that are out of harmony with spirit, with God consciousness, with God realization. Because this is basically about being like God, being like source, being like spirit, being like divine mind, in everything, in every thought, in every action, more and more, connecting yourself back, catching yourself. So, the bonds are the ways that we think. I'd like you to imagine a ladder. And this ladder has 10 rungs on it, from the floor all the way up to the top of the ladder. And at the top of the ladder is the highest rung. And at the top of the ladder are the words, "This is my desire," and it's aligned with spirit. Again, this is my desire, and it's aligned with spirit. So what is your desire? My desire is to align with spirit. So what is your desire? My desire is to manifest abundance into my life. Perfectly aligned. We came from an abundant source. My desire is to feel a sense of well-being in my body at all times. Perfectly aligned. My desire is to have divine spiritual relationships in my life. My desire is to get the job that I am working towards getting. My desire is to live in a place where I feel most peaceful and most loving. My desire is, and these, whatever it is, it doesn't make any difference. It's the 10th rung. It's the highest rung. It is your spirit aligned with your desire. All right? So here it is. It's right up here. Now you have to ask yourself the question, what is it that I offer up to this 10th rung desire? All right? A 10th rung has to have, in order for it to manifest and show up in your life, it has to have thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that match up to that. And if they don't match up, you get out of harmony. See, thoughts are energy. Like everything in the universe, it's energy. Einstein said that nothing happens until something moves. That we have has an energy component to it. We can measure our thoughts and how they impact us, whether they strengthen us or weaken us at any time in our lives. All right, so there's a wonderful book written about this, and it's called Ask and It Is Given. Read frequently, and great teachings, I think among the greater teachings on the planet today. In fact, I wrote the foreword to it. It's something that I very strongly embrace. And they talk in there about how to manifest your desires. And the mistake that most of us make is that we attract what we don't want because our thoughts are on what we don't want. Or we continue to attract what's missing in our life. We're not at number 10, we're at about number 3. And what are some of these on these lower rungs? It probably won't happen. It's very difficult. These kinds of things have never happened for me before. I don't have this kind of luck. We've got the wrong people in the White House. The economy is bad. I don't have the ability to make it happen. I don't really believe it's possible. She said, well, of course. Who wouldn't want to be rich? We all want to have abundance in our life. Of course that. I said, so let me see if I understand this. You want to attract being rich into your life, and your thought about it is that it'll never happen. So what do you think you're going to attract? You're going to attract, it'll never happen. And that very simple little example, it's an innocuous example, she was a very bright and intelligent lady, it wasn't about that, it's about what kind of energies we have within ourselves that we offer to what our desires that are aligned with spirit in order for them to manifest. And every thought, if you have a second wrong thought that it probably won't happen, it's not likely, it's never happened before, it's just not the way it works for me, it's always been missing. As long as you think like that, and you're in a universe that operates on this law of attraction, you will continue to attract it.